Welcome to the Bearded Tits podcast, the nature-based show hosted by me, Jack Perks. Each week I'm joined by a guest from the world of wildlife television, art and science. We take a light-hearted look into what makes these people tick and connect with the natural world so strongly, with new episodes out every Tuesday. This week I chat to Charlie Hamilton James, who is a camera operator, presenter and award-winning photographer. You'll have seen him and his work in programmes like I Brought a Rainforest, Halcyon River Diaries, and his camera work has been featured in numerous blue-chip nature programmes. We cover a whole range of subjects, from his passion for otters and kingfishers, what pisses him off in wildlife photography, and briefly mention his upcoming book, I Can't Eat My Guinea Pig, I've Had Too Much Cocaine. Strap yourselves in, it's going to be an interesting podcast. Well, thanks for joining me, Charlie. Oh, I've got you mid-slurp, sorry.
Yeah. Obviously, I have to have a cup of tea before we do this.
Yeah.
While we're doing this.
Yeah, well, same here. I've got mine to hand as well. And I don't know if you can remember, quite a while ago, we did meet at Wild Photos.
That was a while ago.
It was a while ago. And I remember, because I was at Falmouth at the time, at the course, the Marine Natural History course they have there. And there was, during the break, all the students would scramble to the speakers. And I remember there being like a queue almost for people to try and talk to you. And you were very polite because you were talking to people, and then I eventually got my turn, and I can't remember what we talked about. We had a quick chat anyway. I thought that was quite good of you. And I remember the following day, I just walked past you in the hallway, and you said, "Oh, hello, Jack." And I thought, "Oh, that's nice that he actually remembered my name rather than just walking by as so many others do." So I thought that was quite good.
You see, Hector, who was my assistant back then, who's now an established cameraman, he used to say to me, "Why is it that you get all the weirdos and everyone else gets all the normal people?" So don't feel flattered, Jack. Because I used to stand there and you'd say, "Why do you get all the weirdos?" I don't know.
Well, you know what? I've been called worse than that, so I'll take that. And maybe they see that in you, Charlie. They're like, he's one of us. He's one of these.
Yeah, I suspect that is the case.
I think it's got to be that, hasn't it? You've had a pretty varied career in both stills and moving image. But what would you say was your kind of break into the industry then?
I don't know. There was several, actually. I mean, I started working for Attenborough when I was 16.
Oh, wow.
And I was like the kingfisher guy at the beginning. I grew up right next to the BBC, but I was also obsessed with kingfishers. So I by the time I was 16, I was like the kingfisher guy at the BBC, because kingfishers were always in kind of high demand and were seen as difficult to film. I got a lot of work doing that. So, I was getting paid £30 a day to work on the Trials of Life.
Yeah.
So I kept doing that for 2 decades, really. And then I also became the otter guy. So I really cornered 2 British species that were difficult to film, but probably the most popular 2 species in Britain, really.
Yeah, they got good followings.
To have on TV. So I ended up really cornering that sort of market as far as kingfishers and otters.
So you had to choose between a kingfisher and otter. Have you got a favourite, or is that an impossible question?
Oh no, it's otters every time.
Fuck kingfishers.
No, I love them, but I just, I've done it, and like, there's not a part of me that I still get a thrill when I see one, but there is not a single part of me that wants to sit in a hide and photograph kingfishers anymore.
Oh, really?
So
just because you've been there and done that?
I've just done it since I was 12. Also, I don't bait kingfishers anymore.
No.
So it's, the only way I can really work with them would be to sit outside a nest and do. So it's just, I've got no reason to other than passion. And to be honest, I've spent thousands of hours doing it. I just don't really need to anymore.
No, I mean, the thing with kingfishers, I guess, as well, is they're not that difficult to see. Like, to get a photo is a different thing, but you can walk along pretty much any river in the UK and you've got a chance of seeing one, beep, 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 the little, whatever they call, kind of high-pitched call going by. But to see an otter, that's an event, really. Like, they're everywhere, but they're not easy to see. So, I mean, I can count with one hand how many times I've I've chanced upon an otter in the day in England anyway, and it is always amazing to see them. So I can kind of see.
But
what you mean.
now it's totally different now to what it was 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, you just didn't see otters certainly in England.
No.
Apart from a very, occasionally on the levels, occasionally on the Broads, and you could see them up in Scotland and, yes, it's sort of in West Wales and Central Wales, but to see them in England like we do now, often in towns and cities, it is amazing how they've not just come back, but how they've urbanized or just become more accepting of people. And I don't really understand why they've done it. I understand how they've come back, but why they've started becoming more diurnal and more, some of the, I'm not going to mention any names of towns, but some places, certainly in the south of England, you can just walk through town, there's otters swimming around everywhere. I saw 7 otters it was a quarter-mile stretch.
Yeah, they have become
prolific
in some places almost, haven't they?
Yeah.
And without naming names, there's a few places that come to mind that I can think you've got a reasonable chance of seeing an otter, now really.
Yeah, it's crazy. But yeah, it's nice. I think it's wonderful.
They're amazing creatures. I mean, I've been lucky enough to go to Shetland a couple of times, and you kind of get a bit blasé. I know you've been there multiple times, but you get a little bit blasé, or I do in the end, because you're almost seeing them. You're kind of wafting them out the path, like walking down the street. Like, oh, there's another otter. Get out the way. They're everywhere up there, and it's magical wherever you see them, really, isn't it? We mentioned a little bit about stills and video. So again, you've worked in both of those industries. Have you got a preferred one? I mean, I know you're doing some work with National Geographic at the moment, aren't you? I'm presuming that's stills predominantly, but you have you got one that you prefer to do, or is it kind of part and parcel?
No, I mean, I much prefer shooting stills. I started out as a cameraman and then ended up as a presenter and a producer, and then I went into stills. And the reason I went into stills is because I always wanted to be a stills photographer. That's what I ever really wanted to be. I only made TV because there was an actual, there was an industry, there was a TV industry. There is no real wildlife photography industry. It's more of a loose collection of people, and the work is very insecure, and it's very difficult to make a living as a wildlife photographer. And I didn't want to, couldn't be bothered. I wanted to go and get paid to do the thing I loved rather than really struggling. And I'm very honest about it. That's why I became cameraman, and I loved being I loved it, but to me it was never the challenge I really wanted. Taking stills was what I wanted to work for National Geographic when I was 10. That's what I ever really wanted to do, and I took a very long circuitous route into doing that. And I don't I loved working in TV, but it wasn't my great passion. My great passion was animals, and TV requires a huge amount of work that's not involved in your passion. There's a lot of paperwork, there's a lot of bureaucracy, there's especially when you're producing, there's a whole lot of stuff you do that isn't really what you want to be doing. And and whereas stills, I'm out doing the thing I want to be doing all the time. So
I guess it's more simplistic then with stills.
It is. I think it's more simple, but I actually think it's a harder discipline. Capturing a still image is, to me, it's technically more difficult. I say that, I'm really talking about when I was working in TV. I look at the stuff that's being done now by, certainly my old assistants, my old colleagues, and I'm just, I'm just blown away by, you look at the work that Jamie McPherson's doing, and it just on, our planet and things, using gyro-stabilized camera equipment, and it's just mind-blowing what those guys are doing. I think it's all wonderful, but it's a different world to me now.
Yeah, it advances so quickly, I guess, isn't it? I mean, camera gear, on a completely different level, obviously this is right at the bottom of the food chain, but say GoPros, for example. I remember the very first GoPro and trying to play around with that. And I look back at it now and it's like a potato, the quality that you got from it. And that's only like 7 years ago. It's not that long ago compared to what you can do now. But obviously the higher spec cameras are advancing so quickly. It's incredible. But it is interesting to hear you say that, because when I've spoken to people who do both video and stills, nearly everyone says they enjoy the stills more. And I think you've kind of summed it up when you say, yeah, it's a little bit more, it's just you with the camera and you've got a little bit more freedom and there's not so much bureaucracy and other things like that in there. So yeah, I'd love to just do stills like yourself, but if I just did stills, I'd probably be living in a box at the side of the street somewhere. So I think you got to diversify a little bit. And am I right in saying you did go to university in Falmouth for a brief? You didn't do 3 years, did you? You just kind of did it a little bit and thought no, or what's the story?
So I failed really badly at school. I only got 3 GCSEs,
right.
One of which was woodwork, and so I wasn't qualified to do very much. So I got on a BTEC photography course in Falmouth, and it was the second year they'd run the photography course in Falmouth. So it's 1990, I think. So there was no degree back then.
Right, I'm with you.
There was no wildlife. It was a basic. They did a basic BTEC ND course, and you could go on to do an HND course, and it was 2 years. It was 2 years full time.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
And actually, I had a lot of fights with my my lecturer there, Dave, who weirdly I messaged about 5 minutes before coming on this podcast. I had a lot of fights with Dave. Dave and I hated each other because I was an arrogant little prick, and all I wanted to do was photograph wildlife, and he didn't want me to do wildlife at all. So the course in Falmouth was nothing to do with wildlife, and his message was, look, stop doing wildlife. You come here to learn photography. I didn't want to learn how to light a vase, a jug full of water and a cup full of, I didn't want to. And I look back now and I with shame really, because Dave was 100% right, is that, I think to be a good wildlife photographer, you have to know what a good photo is. You need to learn photography just as much as you need to learn fieldcraft. And he knew that, and actually we get on great now. I mean, we're good mates on Facebook. So, but no, it then became eventually was it a marine biology and natural history course, whatever it is now.
Yeah.
But, I haven't been there in 25 years. So
no, you're not missing much.
It was a wonderful place to go. The only reason I went to college was that I grew up in the middle of Bristol. I wanted to go and live in the countryside somewhere, and we had friends in a place called Constantine, a little village outside Falmouth. And I went and lived with them, and that's really the reason I went to college, was so I could live in the countryside.
I think that's a big draw for a lot of people that go to that university, is like you get to live in Cornwall for 2-3 years or whatever, and it's an amazing world that's completely different to what most of us are used to. Cornwall just has its own ecosystem into wildlife and people, and it's just a very different place, but it's a lovely place to live when you get the chance.
But I think my son is going to apply.
Oh, really? Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
he should do.
I was talking to him about it the other day. So
how was he? 18 or a bit older?
20.
20. Okay. Yeah. Tell him to go to Club I.
All right.
That's an experience. That's all you need to learn down there, really. It's terrible. So you moved out to Wyoming in 2015, I think. Is that right? So how is it out? How is it living out there compared to, say, the UK? Because it must be completely different to what it's like here.
Yeah, I mean, it was just like kind of posh Scotland, I always say. It's like Africa with good internet and coffee.
Okay.
It's an amazing place. You can go out on a game drive in the morning and see bears and wolves and, elk. You can see things being hunted. It's amazing, actually. I mean, we lived in Jackson Hole, which is kind of, they call it the coolest small town in the Rockies. And it's a very shishi is probably the wrong word. It's a very cool little place. There's far too many tourists there, so it's kind of ruined in the summer. But Grand Teton National Park is just stunning. And, I've got fond memories of working there and I did a lot of camera trapping there.
I think, is that the stuff you've done with bears on carcasses and things like that? Is that what?
Yeah, I did a lot of work with bears. I did a lot of failed work with wolves, a lot of cougars, and but just a phenomenal place to live. And you've got a cool little town to live in, and then just this extraordinary environment to spend your time. Whether you're skiing or hiking or running away from bears, or it's just wonderful. You just pack the car up every day and drive off, and you never know what you'll see.
Did you see the recent video of the hiker and the cougar? I think that was doing the rounds of.
Yeah,
I don't know whereabouts that was shot, but
Colorado, wasn't it?
So it might have been, yeah. And it's a bit misleading because you think the cougar's just attacking him, but you could see the cubs, I think, at the beginning. So obviously it's just the mum freaking out because he's too close to them, and he's just
and I think she did an amazing job.
Yeah.
She's like, leave me alone. He's like, okay, we're going to leave you alone now.
Yeah.
No, she was great. I've seen so many people, reviewing it and everything else. But no, I mean, it was a phenomenal bit of footage. And, and I think both the female and the hiker did very well.
They came off all right, both of them, didn't they?
Well, they're both alive and they both,
Which is, it's a win-win, isn't
all
it?
you want.
Now, you starred in a series called I Brought a Rainforest, which I think you got it for about $6,000, and you got 100 acres in Peru. So what made you want to do that? What was your thought process like? I'm going to buy a rainforest,
There wasn't much thought process. I got a call from my mate, Rob. Him and I had been working in Manu in Peru, National Park, a lot. And so, I've been working there for 20 years. Rob was working there at the time. And he just, the head of the national park had asked him if we could buy this bit of forest, and Rob just phoned me up and said, do you want to buy it? And I said, yeah, straight away, without thought. And we just did it. And it was a stupid thing to do.
Have you still got it? Or
it's they built a park ranger station on it. No one bothered to tell me. It's there. I think they're on an agreement of a 99-year lease at $1 a year.
Okay,
but I haven't managed to get my money yet. I must be owed like $7 or $8 now.
Oh well, you don't want to be out of pocket, Charlie. I mean, you need to think about this. Didn't you? I remember correctly. Didn't you find some guys not doing drugs? They were making drugs. Was that right on there, or
yeah? There was like the whole sort of experience was. I mean, there was a logging camp on it. There was an illegal coca plantation, and so we made that TV show really. I mean, it was funny because it was the easiest sell imaginable when you go into, we had a meeting with the head of science at BBC, and, we told her the title, and it was just instant. Yeah, we want that. But then, what was it? We didn't really know what it was. It was, a stupid Englishman who's bought a rainforest. So the process of making it was exhausting and extraordinary. And, I genuinely hadn't seen it when we first filmed it, and it was a kind of interesting process where I didn't know all the problems I'd just bought basically until I got there. So it was, and halfway through, the realization of the real stupidity of what I had done. Well, because I bought. I guess the most obvious way to describe it was there was an illegal logger on the land called Ilias. I bought the land off his dad, who had been in prison for processing coca. And the Ilias, the guy who lived on the land, was a very prolific illegal logger, known by the authorities as a crook. He was this, he was that. And I was kind of terrified of him. And this director, Gavin, shows up. He said, well, you're going to have to kind of go meet him. You do own the land he lives on. And I went and met him one day. He was actually chopping a tree down when I met him. And I was terrified of illegal loggers because all I ever heard was bad stuff. And anyway, I met him. He was this nice guy. He said, and they're filming me, the whole thing's being filmed. And he says, I said, look, you've got to get off the land. We bought this land to protect it for the national park because it butts the national park. He said, I can't. I've got this disabled daughter. If you kick me off the land, I've got nothing. And I didn't believe him. And I turned to the camera and basically said, yeah, what a load of bullshit. So I said, I'll call this bluff. I said, okay, I'll come on. Why don't I come around to your house tomorrow and meet her? So I went around to his house the next day, and I met Heidi, his severely disabled daughter. Gavin, the director's like on behind the camera saying, "So you still going to kick him off the land, Charlie?" And I'm like, what sort of asshole would I be if I did? And what that did is that opened this massive can of worms, because I bought this land, but it's got an illegal logger living on it, and the legal logger has a disabled daughter, and his only form of income to look after his family is this land and logging, and so I went on this journey across the Amazon to figure out this one problem, and this one problem was representative of all of the problems in the Amazon, basically, which are resource extraction by people with nothing, people with nothing living on the edge of an enormously valuable resource. So, my process to discover how to, relook at the Amazon and Amazon conservation was based on one of actual experience and being filmed, being dragged through this kind of emotional mess and new understanding of the world, new understanding of life. And I think I came out of it, certainly a more liberal person.
I suppose it's easy to see things as black and white, isn't it? But very few things in life are black and white. And, you can say all loggers are evil because they're doing this, but you don't really think about potentially why they are doing it. So it's not something that we talk about, really, is it?
No, I was photographing poachers on the border with Kenya and Tanzania the other day, and I'm with the rangers. It's like 10 o'clock at night. It's dark. They just arrested 2 poachers. They're treating them like shit, and they're kind of knocking them around a bit. And I show up and photograph them, and and there's me and a journalist, and she's making a real effort to, and I am as well. We're both making a real effort to humanize these people to the rangers, so they realize that these are human beings. And after half an hour, they got it. They stopped treating them badly, and they thought, oh, these are human beings. And it's really, conservation really can boil down so often to just the need of people for protein. People need protein. It's really simple. If you deny people protein, they have to find other ways to get it. And so, old-fashioned ideas of good versus bad, illegal loggers are bad, gold miners are bad. It's just nonsense. These are often good people or normal people. It's too easy to go one way or another and say they're great people or bad people. They're just normal people that have normal needs, and they're denied normal needs by their situation. And so they have to find other ways of meeting those needs. And what we tend to do is turn people into bad guys and good guys. And that's not fair. Take hunting, for example. In Africa, white people hunt, black people poach. It's really, you want a black and white issue, put it down those lines. One can afford to hunt, one can't, one poaches. It's really that simple. And when you look at it like that, you see the absurdity and the hypocrisy of it. And it's the same all over certainly the developing world. And I spent, on that Rainforest series, I went and lived and worked with illegal loggers. And I did all that stuff just so I could understand. I'd never really understand their predicament, but so I could get an inkling into their predicament.
Yeah.
Because if we ignore it, if we write people off, if we deny people these things, then what? All we're going to ever do is fight with them.
Yeah.
And lose, because we are losing.
And nothing gets solved, does it? So it makes sense. One of the things I really enjoyed about you when you were on Twitter, and I'll mention this in a second, but was just how you really didn't seem to give a fuck about what you said. Some of the captions that were on there I found quite refreshing, actually, in particular, because a lot of people are so precious about how their online persona is. I think one of the ones that stood out, I can remember, I think it was a large mosquito-looking thing, and the caption you had was like, "This is a cunt," or something like that, because it had bitten you, and it was just this really mean-looking fucking mosquito. And I just thought, do you think it matters what you post, or is it just a case of being yourself?
Yeah, I so I have a whole career based on being myself. I had it written into my contract with the BBC that I could swear in I bought a Rainforest series. And it's not because I want to show off, it's just because, in our industry, too often, certainly with men, there's this there's this idea of being a hero and placing ourselves as the hero in our own narrative. And certainly if you look at Discovery Channel and BBC and all these shows where there's this kind of hero white guy, and I find it so obtuse and boring because we're not heroes. We all have vulnerabilities, and it's just I've always been the same in the workplace. I have no interest in professionalism at all. I'm interested in being a decent human being, because I am a decent human being, and that's all I'm interested. I'm not interested in creating a fake persona of myself in order to progress my agenda. I'm interested in just being a normal human being, because normal human beings are accessible to other people. So that's how I do it, and it's the same with Instagram. I love playing on Instagram. I've got an audience, but they're not customers to me. They're not of any value other than they're other decent human beings that I can interact with. So yeah, that's kind of how I play it. But I have got into taking the piss quite a lot lately, but mainly out of people with big egos who need bringing down a peg or two.
Yeah, no, everyone needs a shot in the kneecap every now and again, I think, just to bring them to the level. So what prompted you to leave Twitter? Because I was when I originally was trying to get in touch with you, I thought, I'll speak to Charlie on Twitter. And I thought, right, that's been about 4 years or however when you left. So that's why I got in touch via Instagram. But what was the kind of catalyst where you thought, I'm getting out of here?
I would get up every morning and I would sit on the loo and go through Twitter.
It's a lovely picture to think of that.
Yeah, it is. Isn't that lovely? No, I just realised that it made me miserable. I realised one day, I thought, I'd spend all day getting antagonised by it. Why do I do it? I described it as two people playing chess by throwing all the pieces at each other. So that was my analogy.
Yeah.
And so I just quit one day, and I do not miss it at all. And it's the thing is with Twitter, it's all it's all subjective, because you really follow the people or the news content or whatever that you're interested in. It's the ultimate kind of form of subjective reasoning to support your own arguments. You have this idea of how you think the world is, and you subjectively pick things that adhere to that. I think the problem now, certainly, it's the same with Facebook. Instagram's not so bad, but Facebook and Twitter is just a stream of misery and depressing shit. And I just don't want, I actually only read one news. I read the Washington Post every day, which is, to me, a measured newspaper. But I don't need to be then bombarded with a load of left and right bullshit constantly. So, certainly as someone who kind of sits in the middle politically, I don't need this right and left extremism all the time.
It seems
miserable.
Well, it does. It seems to be a more recent thing as well. I mean, I remember when Facebook was just pictures of cats and photos of your auntie, and now it's just full of memes. Like you say, it's either seems to be extreme left or extreme right. Like, so there's not a lot in the middle very often, and it does kind of get a bit like, why are you bothering? So I'd agree that Instagram's probably the best out of a bad bunch, really. But I do kind of prefer that to the others, definitely.
Yeah, it's not as political, and I'm not at all political when I work with Instagram, and I've got no interest in being political. Yeah, what I do occasionally, I get drunk and I post pictures of cowboys branding cows, just to see the absolute hysterical outrage and people unfollowing me. I've lost 5,000 followers in the last 6 weeks.
That's
I'm
impressive.
doing well. I don't know how I did it. So, but no, if I post a cow, because I like working with cowboys. I was living in Wyoming, but I'd go and shoot the cattle branding, and you'd post a picture of that, and Jesus, the outrage.
Really? Yeah. Oh,
yeah,
I
understand it. I understand it to an extent. It's a brutal, painful experience. But the outrage would be, is aimed at me, and that's what it's funny. But also, what it does is it reveals this massive political polarization in the US, where someone does something that you don't like or you don't agree with, and they should die, and you hate them. And that's what it actually reveals when you look at the comments. I mean, if you ever got 10 minutes to scroll through my Instagram feed until you find a cow being branded, and just read those comments.
Oh God.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'll do that next time. Next time I'm on the toilet and I'm
there you go.
You know, when I think this is going to be a 10-minute job, I'll.
You've got a long one.
I'll. You know, I'll give that a bash. So. This obviously, you know, got lots of opinions and lots of things. I wondered what pisses you most off in wildlife photography. Is there something in particular where you're like, oh God?
Well, I don't know if you saw my recent masterclass. Did you see it?
No, what was that?
Oh, it's on my feed. I put it on my feed, so it's there. So I did a masterclass on. I hate egos. I hate big egos in wildlife. I hate the fact that they do better than the rest of us. Because if you constantly tell everyone, especially in the States, if you constantly tell everyone how amazing you are, people believe it. And I call it the ego warrior. So you get these photographers who position themselves as artists. That's a key word they would use. And they caption their work in several ways, one of which is so it's all about them, for instance. So you'll start with a little bit about climate change, and then very quickly the narrative turns to them and how they are saving the world and helping the rest of us. It's one of the ways it's done. They talk about their art in great deep terms when it's just a photo of an animal that's made black and white in Photoshop. Perfectly normal picture of an animal. Yeah. And I don't like, particularly the thing I really dislike, which I see done a lot, is the way that these people will cast the natural world in sort of mythological and spiritual terms, and cast themselves as someone who has a deep understanding of that. And what that does, that actually makes the natural world less accessible to the average member of the public who, say, lives in a city and doesn't really understand the natural world in terms beyond what they've experienced and witnessed on television. So if you do that, if you cast the world in these spiritual terms, and then you become the preacher, the person that understands it, people look at you as if you have this great depth. But the truth is that there is no deep spiritual side to nature. A fox is a fox, a wolf is a wolf. It doesn't matter how you pretend, and it's just the way it is. So I don't like that to me, a very deliberate false narrative propagated in order to make themselves look good. And I will be doing more masterclasses in the next few weeks on the subject, because it's one thing doing that, writing stuff like that, but it's another thing. To me, it's another problem that they seem to do very well out of it, when it's, to me, disingenuous and lacks all integrity. And it's all about narcissism and ego.
Do you find that is more of an American thing, a British thing, or is it all across the table?
Well, as I'm not going to name any names.
No. It's both. Okay.
But you know exactly who I'm talking about.
I do. Yeah, no, I do. Because I think someone shared an article the other day, and I think you were quoted in that article, so I'm pretty sure I know.
There's quite a few out there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, no, there is. Yeah, definitely. It's, I mean, as well, I think with wildlife photography, it's not, being a professional is not necessarily indicative of skill.
No, I mean, I don't know. Sorry, my mum's just come in from doing the shopping.
It's even when you get old, it's never escaping that, is there? Well, I've got one more question anyway, and then we'll wrap up. So, as a wildlife cameraman, you're often put into uncomfortable situations. Whether it's boiling hot weather or fly-infested jungles. What's the kind of worst situation that you've been in?
Blimey.
So many to choose.
No, I mean, I'm just the worst situation. So
as in like uncomfortable, I guess. Like where have you been? Like, oh God, what am I doing in my life? don't say every day. Like I'm not on about an existential crisis. I mean, we're filming.
Yeah, I think the time we smuggled ourselves into Zimbabwe illegally.
Can you talk about this?
And then, well, I was doing a film. Jamie and I were doing a film on Victoria Falls. He wasn't there actually; he was somewhere else. So I smuggled. I drove a speedboat with all my equipment. It was when the BBC was banned from Zimbabwe.
Right.
And in the morning, I drove across the river, the Zambezi, above the falls, in a little speedboat with all my equipment into some dirt track in the middle of nowhere, kind of upriver from Victoria Falls town, which is in Zimbabwe. And I got met by my friend in a pickup truck and driven into town. And we waited it out until dark. We were trying to shoot lunar rainbows across the falls. And we kind of waited it out till dark because we wanted to kind of cross the falls secretly. But while we were waiting out, we just got incredibly stoned and on Malawi gold. That's wonderful stuff. And then we drove down to the river. We drove through town, through Victoria Falls town with all our equipment and loaded it into this inflatable canoe in this kind of lay-by on the edge of the river.
This is not the Malawi gold you're talking about. This is camera gear, isn't it? You're not smuggling that
This
over.
is camera gear,
okay,
yeah.
Good. Just making
and
sure.
And then Mikey, this horrible little racist kid, awful kid, had a canoe, and me and my mate had this inflatable canoe. And he went out in front, and we kind of set off with this inflatable canoe. And the first thing that happened was there was a massive crocodile. All we had was my little head torch, and it was this enormous crocodile. So we just had to canoe at this thing until it went under. And then we got out. So from Zimbabwe, the first bit of water, the first island across, because the falls is made up like a mile of different islands. The first island is called the Devil's Cataract. We were trying to get onto the Devil's Cataract. You're not allowed on the Devil's Cataract. So we canoed out, and you hit a rip where the water starts speeding up because it's going over the falls. We're only like 100 yards above the falls there. And we hit the rip. And as we hit it, realised that the canoe was deflating. Because it
Oh, God, not what you want.
And I'm like, Tommy, shit, what do we do? I'm freaking out. What do we do? And he says, just row. So we just rowed as fast and as hard as we could. And the canoe was just going down and down and down. And we got to the bushes on the other side just before we went over the edge of the falls, basically.
Jesus.
And it was dark, and we were completely freaked out. And we were there, then we're on the Devil's Cataract. Of course, once you're there, you know you have to get back. And I said to Tommy, what do we do now? He said, follow the hippo trails. I'm like, Christ's sake.
That's a brilliant idea.
So following hippo trails around in the dark. And that was kind of the scariest moment. And that whole evening, because then, we had to spend 4 hours shooting rainbows in the dark, knowing that we had to get back. And I think that was the kind of scariest and most, but uncomfortable. Yeah. I mean, just, I don't know. You just get used to it, don't you?
Yeah.
You just get used to being incredibly uncomfortable for long. I mean, filming otters on rivers at night in England in the winter, just agonizingly cold all night.
Yeah.
So,
you're not moving, are you, I guess? So you're going to get cold pretty quick. I remember the bot fly in your head, and that was that was pretty horrific seeing. I don't know if it hurt or not, but just this. I think was it Philippa squeezing it out? That hurt. The leishmaniasis I got in my leg was worse. It's flesh-eating disease. That hurt. That was horrible. But I've been really lucky. I've hardly had any diseases from traveling. That's you should put that on your website. Hardly any diseases as I've gone around the world. That's a good indicator. Well, look, Charlie, it's been fascinating kind of hearing all these stories and what you've been up to, and I appreciate you coming on as well, because I know you're in quarantine at the minute. So
I'm really busy.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's either this or watch reruns of.
Oh, I'm writing my book at the moment.
Oh, are you? What's
Yes.
that? What are you allowed to say what you're writing about, or
I'm writing
secret
autobiography called. It's called "I Can't Eat My Guinea Pig. I've Had Too Much Cocaine," and it comes out next year.
Yeah, well, we've all been there.
True
haven't
story.
we? We've all been in that situation, haven't we?
Well, I have. It's like the other. It's like if you were to write a memoir as a wildlife cameraman, I'm writing all the things that you wouldn't write. It's like everyone else is thinking, oh no, don't say that. I'm just going to say all the things.
You're doing all of that.
I'm doing all of the things that we actually did. I mean, I don't anymore, but all the things we actually did. So, it's a very different look at working for BBC.
Malawi gold and coked up on guinea pigs is the tip of the iceberg, I suspect. So yeah, look forward to that one. Look, cheers, buddy. I appreciate it.
No problem. Good to see you.
One of the things I've always quite admired about Charlie is that he just doesn't give a fuck. And it's quite refreshing, to be honest, because when we live in this day and age of the hey YouTube or hey Instagram, hey guys, all that sort of shit, it's quite nice to see someone who's just being themselves, really, which is quite jarring because people aren't used to it. So I think that's great. I love it. And I love Charlie's work. He's an incredibly talented photographer and camera operator. Next week, I'll be interviewing Nick Baker, who is a wildlife TV presenter, an all-round bug nerd, as we chat about his career and why invertebrates are so amazing. Coincidentally, he was also in quarantine like Charlie, which meant he had the time to do this podcast, so the pandemic is actually helping me pin down guests so far, although Nick's actually in Japan while we recorded this interview. This has been the Bearded Tits Podcast. I've been your host, Jack Perks, and I'll catch you next time. Cheers.